You've had Wendy's Nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's new Saucy Nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're a real heat seeker, try spicy ghost pepper only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. I dare ya. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's at participating Wendy's. And welcome to Andy Staples on 3, presented by Wendy's and those delicious saucy nugs. We'll have some saucy nuggets of the week later this week. And I'm telling you, if you haven't had the saucy nugs, get that Wendy's app, download it, order some. I had some spicy buffalo the other day. Tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. But you'll be hearing a lot more about that throughout the football season. You'll also be hearing a lot more about how to donate to your favorite school's NIL fund. I guess for this year, because the schools are going to be doing this next year, so I don't know if you're going to need to do this anymore, but Oklahoma State blazing trails here. We got QR codes on the back of the helmets. That's right. Oklahoma State is going to have a QR code on the back of its helmet that if you point your camera at it, presumably during a game, I guess you can pause your TV and zoom in, then you'll be able to donate to their general NIL fund. The link takes you right there. I tried it yesterday. It works. Like I had it on my iPad. I had the photo of the helmet with the QR code on it. And I took my phone out and it took me right to that page to donate to their general NIL fund. It feels a little like when you're at a coffee shop and they flip the iPad around and like, do you want to have a tip? That's what it feels like. It's interesting because this is the same week that Mike Gundy went off saying, hey, note to players' agents, the season started, negotiation time is over. Let's run that clip, River. Let's run that clip from Mike Gundy.
That's what I told the players. There's no negotiating now. Portal's over. All negotiations history. Now we're playing football.
You can enjoy
just coaching and playing football.
Conference and a 12-team playoff, and everything being so different, just the newness of it all.
Yeah, and the business side of what we do now is we have to have those conversations with them. Tell your agent to quit calling us and asking for more money. It's non-negotiable now. Going to start again in December. So now we're able to direct ourselves just at football, and that part is fun because there's been so much other stuff going on. It's been hard to really focus on football.
So no negotiating with the players right now, but please tip your player for a great play. Except you're not actually tipping your player because that would be pay for play and that's against the rules. But Mike Gundy's right. This is not the time for negotiation. This is one of the issues that has popped up with basically a completely unregulated situation that they can never regulate unless they collectively bargain with the players, which they don't want to because they don't want the players to be employees. But I digress. They probably don't want to be negotiating with the players during the season. I would agree completely with Mike Gundy here. But the QR code, the please donate to the general fund just feels a little dumb. Like you're pretending this isn't for their ability as football players, but you're like, please, while you're watching them play football, give us money so we can pay them. This is what fans hate about the NIL era. This is what donors hate about the NIL era, and they're right. The shameless, hey, you already bought the ticket. You probably bought the T-shirt. But by all means, please give us more so we can give it to the players. Never mind that we're getting all this TV money. Now, next year, they'll be sharing some of the TV money with the players. But they're still going to be begging you for more because they haven't quite figured out how to figure out their budgets so that they can share that money because they've spent so long not giving the money to the players that they don't know how to do this. But it is a weird message because you got Mike Gundy saying, time for negotiations over. We're done here. And he's right. He's right. because that is the most annoying thing. Like, this is the other part of the NIL era, and this is something that I'm sure players will learn. I think the players with the agents who also represent NFL players, the ones whose agents are a little more experienced in this realm, they're not the ones going back weekly during the season or monthly during the season and saying, I need more money, because their agents understand they've got to maintain relationships. They don't want to burn bridges. But there's also a lot of kind of fly-by-night folks who just say, I'm going to get in the agent business because my cousin plays for so-and-so. Well, they haven't learned that yet. But yeah, the players need to learn. You've made a deal. You think it's a fair deal. You agreed to it. So play through the deal. And at the end of the season, negotiate a new deal. Because the system's going to allow you to do that right now. Because they're too dumb to collectively bargain with you so they can have longer term contracts. So you can renegotiate every year if you want to. Or multiple times. But yeah, just leave it out during the season. But then on the backside of that, you've got schools. We're going to throw this QR code on the back of the helmet. It's not pay for play. It's not pay for play. But please, if they make a good play, pay us to pay them. It's truly amazing. It is truly amazing the times we live in. Maybe they'll figure it out. Maybe they'll figure it out and just, hey, all this money that the schools take in on TV, on tickets, you give some of that to the players. You negotiate with the players to make rules that you can enforce, and they won't sue you for it. If only there were other examples of this in sports and entertainment. If only somebody else did this. But no, it's impossible. How are we ever going to figure this out? Gordian knot. Can't be unbound. That video, by the way, from Caden McFarland, the sports director at KJRH TV. Appreciate that. Mike Gundy's absolutely right, though. It's one of those things where you want to say something about the QR code because it's funny, and it really does remind you of every restaurant where they're flipping the iPad to get the tip. But coming 48 hours after that, it's just hilarious. Christopher Jordan is kind of genius. Oklahoma State is pushing the boundary. Not pushing the boundary. This is completely within the rules. It's just funny because, again, the schools are pretending it's not for their ability as athletes. That's the next frontier. Can we stop that? Can we stop that? Can we just say, we are giving you this money because you are a great offensive tackle? There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing morally wrong with that. There's nothing illegal about that. Actually, it might be illegal given certain states' NIL laws, but as we've learned, as long as the school goes, hey, just rewrite that, please, they'll rewrite it. But yeah, just say, hey, we would like to give you some money because you're a great tight end. You're a great safety. We need a nickel corner, and you're our guy. It's okay. It's okay. We can stop pretending. We can stop pretending. It's a beautiful day, everybody. Beautiful day, because topics like this we'll still talk about in the next few weeks, but we will not spend more than a few seconds on them because we will have real games to talk about. Today, we're going to talk about the first real game. We're going to go very in-depth on the first real game. Florida State and Georgia Tech from Dublin on Saturday. It's coming, people. It is coming. It's going to be glorious. It's going to be glorious. The first real college football game of the year. So we're going in-depth. Jeff Cameron, our friend from War Chant, he's already in Dublin. We talked to him from Dublin. Roddy Jones, our pal from the ACC Network, ESPN, he calls games. Actually, it was announced yesterday, Roddy is going to be partnered with Mark Jones and Quint Kessenich. He's moved up in the broadcast crew hierarchy and very deserving because Roddy is one of the best game analysts you're going to find out there. So Roddy, also former great Georgia Tech running back, talking Jackets, talking the rest of the ACC. So we're going to talk about that later in the show. Got a couple little pieces of news that we need to get to. One, remember, it's QB1 week. This is the week that everybody talks about. Hey, we said we weren't going to tell you who the quarterback. No, here's the quarterback. This is our starting quarterback. South Carolina coach Shane Beamer on Tuesday announced LaNorris Sellers as QB1 for the Gamecocks. And if you've been listening to the show and paying attention to the show, you know our pal Cody Belair, our national scout at On3, loves LaNorris Sellers, loves him, thinks he has potential breakout possibilities. Dark horse Heisman. Cody's even willing to go that far. But let's show that shot of LaNorris Sellers again, River. Look at this. This is beautiful. Look at those rec specs. When's the last time we had a quarterback who wore rec specs? This is going to be fun. So I did go back through the history, trying to find quarterbacks in glasses, because we've seen athletes in glasses before, but not a lot of quarterbacks. Probably the most famous one ever, Bob Greasy with the Dolphins. I believe it was the late 70s when he went with the glasses. He didn't have them earlier in his career, but as his career went on, he added the glasses. So Bob Greasy, and of course, the most famous rec spec wearing football player of all time is Eric Dickerson. Eric Dickerson was a beast playing for the Los Angeles Rams, wearing the rec specs in the beautiful Rams helmet that they should go back to. Oh, with the neck roll. Name me a swaggier player than Eric Dickerson. Name it. Willie Thomas in the chat. Chris Sabo style, baby. That's right. Chris Sabo from those 90s Reds teams. We also got in basketball, Kurt Rambis. He wore the horn rims very famously. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So the Lakers of the early 80s had your horn rims and your rec specs at the same time. Kurt Rambis and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And of course, because we pass these down through the generations, we go from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to Cream Abdul-Jabbar, a.k.a. Larry Nerd. Robbie Avila was great at Indiana State last year, going to be equally great as a St. Louis Billiken now because he followed his coach. This is going to be great. LaNorris Sellers, rec spec wearing quarterback. And I expect, if he doesn't already have an NIL deal for whatever brand, and Rec Specs is a brand, and I'm doing the Band-Aid Jello thing with Rec Specs. I realize there are other brands that manufacture these things. But if he doesn't already have an NIL deal with them or with whatever manufacturer makes his particular spectacles, then what are we even doing here? What are we even doing? I can't wait to see this. Cannot wait. We do have a piece of bad news, unfortunately, coming out of Rutgers camp, and this is we talk about this all preseason. These are the ones we hate. Rutgers linebacker Mohamed Toure out for the season. He led the Scarlet Knights in tackles for loss and sacks last season. One of the big reasons why we were talking about how good this Rutgers defense could be. We look at the schedule for Rutgers. They don't have the toughest Big Ten schedule. We're expecting a pretty good record out of Rutgers this year, but part of that was we were hoping Mohamed Toure was going to have a big season, and unfortunately, he is out for the year, injured in camp. So that sucks. But unfortunately, that's part of the game, and Rutgers will have to dig deep and make up at that position. That's a situation where I think that defense is pretty deep. They should be okay still, but that is absolutely terrible news. So good luck, Mohamed Toure, in your rehab, and we'll be rooting for you. All right, we're going to talk Florida State and Georgia Tech, go deep inside that game. But before we do, I'm going to tell you about Rhoback. That's right, the most comfortable hoodies, polos, joggers, shorts, tennis dresses. I don't wear the tennis dresses, but the ladies do, and they are awesome. Very cool. I wearing the performance hoodie right now, the Rhoback performance hoodie, probably my favorite item of clothing that I own. I have multiples of them. I believe it's 5 right now. I think it was up to 7. My daughter stole 2 of them. and she's not giving them back. If you want your own Rhoback Performance hoodie, and I'd say buy two because somebody's going to steal one, RHOBACK.com, Rhoback.com. Use the code Andy for 20% off your first purchase. That's code Andy, 20% off your first purchase. Rhoback.com, RHOBACK.com. You will not regret it. Jeff Cameron not regretting his life choices because last year he got to go to Dublin to test things out before this year. This year, our friend Jeff from War Chant, that's on 3's Florida State site, which is great. And if you are not signed up, get yourself signed up. Use that code Andy1 and get your first month for $1. But Jeff is in Ireland. Irish O'Fell from War Chant in Ireland right now. They are having a blast. The team's going to be there very soon. The Seminoles and the Yellow Jackets kicking the season off 5 p.m. Dublin time on Saturday, noon Eastern time. This is going to be so much fun. And here's Jeff from Ireland talking Noles. We're joined on a crisp 58-degree day in Dublin, Ireland by Jeff Cameron of War Chant. What's up, Jeff?
Enjoying this, Andy. Enjoying this, buddy. Left Tallahassee, it was 96 and humid, as you well know. And I think it warmed up here today, Andy. It was 58 this morning, but I think we're now in the mid-60s, buddy. Mid-60s.
Glorious. So you're actually like for Florida State, Georgia Tech on Saturday in Dublin, it will be football weather.
It's going to be gorgeous football weather. May get a little mist in there too, as it's wont to do in Dublin. And I think it's going to be perfect football weather for some of the fan base, and maybe for some of the players, it might be a tad bit cold. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I know I'll just tell you, Aviva's open air press box, buddy. So we're in good shape.
Beautiful. That's right, because you're pheasant under glass at Doak Campbell. You don't get to enjoy that experience that much. But let's talk about this game, because obviously for Florida State, the last time they took the field, it was a miserable experience.
Yeah.
That was kind of the result of something that happened off the field, because obviously they win the ACC, they don't make the playoff. The Orange Bowl is what it is. And people pushed back on me when I was picking this game. I said that the players for Florida State who were involved last year, and I realize it's not a huge number, but they do not want this to be the lasting memory, that Orange Bowl to be the memory that everybody has. The coaching staff is all the same. They don't want that Orange Bowl to be the memory everybody has. I'm guessing there's a pretty significant push for these guys to create a new memory here.
You know, it's interesting. I think that's true, Andy, but I also think Mike has spent a lot of time, just oddly, that's not the right phrasing for it. I don't think he spent any time focusing on that game. He's talked about new chapters. Yes, he's talked about every year and every game is unto itself. And he's talked a lot about forging, and getting past things that happened to you in the past. But he's really wanted this group to be about this group. And I think that even though there are a lot of guys on this team that played in that game or didn't play in this game, but were on the team last year, it's interesting. He spent a lot of time just saying, listen, this is another season. We got a chance to etch another chapter in Florida State football lore. And, you need to work. His whole motto is work. He wears the shirt every day, work. And he's got these guys talking about today, right now, right here, Georgia Tech. I don't know that there's this revenge in their mind at the idea that the last time the nation saw them, they were getting beat by Georgia 63-3. Because I'll be honest with you, it's weird. This fan base, and I know other fan bases listening to this will be like, well, great, you can't ignore it. But really, most of this fan base and most of those players don't even look at that game as a game. I'm not sure Kirby Smart did either. And I think we know why that happened. I mean, 16 of the 22 players that start for Florida State didn't play in the game.
Yeah.
Either chose to opt out or have surgery and get ready for the NFL draft. So I don't know. It's really more about this year, I think.
So maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe the Orange Bowl is Godfather 3 or Rocky 5, and we're going to pretend it never happened, right, and then just move right along. But I am intrigued to see this Florida State team because, as we mentioned, it is a mix of guys who did play roles on the ACC championship team last year, but also a bunch of new guys. You've got and I think the D-line's a great example. You got Patrick Payton on one side. He was there. Marvin Jones Jr. on the other side. He was actually playing for Georgia last year.
Correct. Yeah. It's everywhere you look, Andy. This camp has been fascinating for that reason. You got the influx of players from Alabama, LSU, Georgia. You have some returning players that have huge expectations for their season. Patrick Payton is obviously hoping to be a first-round draft pick. He has a chance to be. He's a very talented player. If DJU at quarterback plays, to the best version of DJU that we've seen. He's a guy that's had his good moments. He certainly had his down moments and everything in between. But when he plays well, he plays really well. We'll see if that's what Mike gets out of him, what Tony Kokars can get out of him. But if he plays well and you get a Marvin Jones Jr. to come in and realize his 5-star potential, you look at that body type, Andy. I don't know if you've been around him, but that screams NFL. It reminds me of being around Jermaine Johnson. When you saw Jermaine Johnson, another Georgia transfer at defensive end, like those guys look like they belong in the league. Marvin looks like he belongs in the league. This could be a coming out party for him. And if you have those bookends at defensive end doing that, Florida State could once again have an elite defense. I thought at the end of last year that defense was playing as well as anybody's, and they have a chance, I think, to be a top 20 defense again this year. I actually think that's really the crux of this team. The offense, I think, will start slow this year because of all of the new pieces, including a brand new quarterback, brand new running back, brand new receivers. I do think that they're going to take some time to develop on offense. They're aided by the fact that they have a deep and very experienced offensive line. But I think the defense will carry the day for this team early on. So
you mentioned DJ Uiagalelei, and it's weird because Florida State fans very familiar with DJU because he was Clemson's starter for a couple of years. He goes to Oregon State last year. I'm curious, is he going to look different? Are they going to deploy him differently, or is it going to look different than what he looked like at Clemson, different than what he looked like at Oregon State? Or is it the same guy just running Florida State's offense?
Well, they brought in a bunch of speed to try to utilize his arm strength. Obviously, he excels at getting the ball down the field. So you're not going to want to get away from that. If they can protect the quarterback and let plays develop and get down the field, they're going to do that. But they're going to try to do it off of play action and run the ball. I think this year's team, unlike last year's team, this year's team is going to try to run the ball as their main modus operandi. I mean, if you look at the offensive line, Andy, there's some guys that have been playing here since 2019 on this offensive line. It's crazy. So they've got guys up front, and they feel good about how deep the running back room is. So I think they're going to try to run the ball, but that includes DJU, to answer your question. I think they're going to run him too. It sounds weird to say, but this is a guy that was effective with his legs when he does run. Obviously, it's not the same as when Jordan Travis ran. Jordan Travis was a guy that could change the scoreboard. He's a guy that could go 80 yards if you missed in the open field. DJU's not that guy, but he is 245 pounds. He is 6'4", 6'5". He's a guy that I think can really excel in short yardage. And Florida State has the ability, because they have really at least 9 offensive linemen that they trust right now. They can go big and really kind of try to play some bully ball in short yardage situations with a 240-pound plus quarterback. So I think they will try to run him some this year. He's never excelled at throwing on the run, in my opinion. He's been inaccurate in that role. So I'll be curious to see if they have him roll out a lot and give him those options. But I do think they will run him. So how weird is it to say that Florida State feels comfortable with their offensive line, that they feel secure, that there are 9 players who can play? Like, I'm looking at the projected or looking at the depth chart, and you're right. It's guys they've had. Now, some of those guys were transfers when they got there, but it's guys they've had. Richie Leonard, obviously the new guy from Florida this year, who was a starter for Florida last year. But it's a lot of guys who've played for Alex Atkins for a long time now. And, for years, it felt like that was the thing Florida State could never get right. But now it feels like a strength. It is, and it's really odd to say. When I hear back from the fan base when we do the Daily Show, they're all, like uncomfortable almost, saying, could it be that the offensive line is the strength of the team? But it is. I mean, Darius Washington's played 6 years of college football. He's your starting left tackle. He was all ACC last year. I think he's got a chance to be an All-American this year. You like to see guys like that rewarded, because he was on this team at a time when they were terrible, when they just weren't any good at all. And so he's seen this whole thing through to where they went undefeated in the regular season last year and won the ACC title. So he's a guy that you feel happy about because he saw it through. But that's also true of Maurice at center, Maurice Smith, who's been here forever, played a ton of football. So your left tackle and your starting center, 2 pretty key positions, are guys that have played a lot of college football, gotten a lot bigger and a lot stronger. They know Alex Atkins and what he wants, like the back of their hand. And again, you're talking about when you go through this list of guys, redshirt senior, senior, redshirt junior, redshirt. It's crazy. So I do think it is the strength of this team is the offensive line. They have to be able to run. Mike last year did not like the fact that they could not run the ball. They failed a lot in that aspect. Trey Benson was a great running back, and obviously I think has a chance to do very well with the Arizona Cardinals. But this is a guy that was a boomer bust runner behind last year's line. It was weird. You'd watch Florida State lose on first down, lose on second down. They get bailed out because Jordan could make throws to Keon Coleman, who's an NFL wide receiver, and Johnny Wilson and guys like that who had size advantage, talent advantage, and they would find ways to move the ball, but it was not efficient. That offense was not that efficient in the second half of the season. Some of that was injury, but some of that was that they could never really run the ball the way they wanted to. I think Mike is hell-bent on doing that this year behind this veteran offensive line.
Well, we saw a breakout game from Lawrence Toafili in the ACC championship game, but then they bring in Roydell Williams from Alabama, who was an effective runner at Alabama, just basically got stuck behind Justice Haynes and Jam Miller. So I would think that they should feel pretty good with it. And the way they said it, they put out the depth chart, they basically put them both as starters. And I imagine we're going to see a healthy dose of both of them.
You will, and you'll see other guys too. You see the freshman Cam Davis, who comes in at 235 pounds as a true freshman. Looks like, honestly, there have been jokes and memes around Tallahassee. He looks like Herschel Walker. I'm not going to say he plays like Herschel Walker. He
My God, a freshman.
He is massive and fun to watch. They've got some guys that really they can deploy a bunch of different guys that, depending on what you want to do, they got guys that can catch in space. Toafili has as good a hands for a running back in terms of receiving the football that I've ever seen. He catches everything. I really believe they could just line him up in the slot and have him be a receiver, and they might at times. So you have the versatility of a Lawrence Toafili. I think you've got the stability of Roydell, and then you've got a stable of running backs that they like 5 or 6 deep. So they're going to play a lot of guys. That might include a couple freshmen.
So how much is ESPN going to regret sending College Game Day to this game?
I'm looking out my window of the hotel room. We're in downtown Dublin city center right here. It's a beautiful, I wish I could show it to you, but the glare was so bad we couldn't. I was trying to shoot it out the window so you could see it, trying to make you jealous. But it's a beautiful day in Dublin. The breeze is blowing. The fans so far are in a jovial mood. I went out last night to a couple of pubs, imagine that, and had a few cold Guinness and ran into some Florida State fans. They're starting to make their way into Tallahassee. A lot of them are seeing the rest of the island, if you will. They're going around, but they'll start really, I think, coming in droves around Wednesday or Thursday. I'm stunned that ESPN made the decision to do it. I will be very interested to see the setup. I don't think it's a wise idea to send Kirk Herbstreit to Dublin for Florida State's first game since he championed the cause before Jordan Travis got hurt. People will remind him of that, and they have repeatedly. And I think that might make for an uncomfortable game day if the setting is such that fans can, be heard. Let's put it that way. So I'm very curious to see what happens. Obviously, I think some Florida State officials they're not nervous about violence or anything silly like that, but they are nervous about probably the image of what's going to come across there on game day if fans have access to that set.
Well, if what I've read on the internet is anything, if they vocalize what they have typed, they'll have to get that dump button ready pretty quick. So,
and I think they will vocalize what they have typed because, Andy, we're talking about a 5 o'clock kickoff over here all day, beautiful weather, lots of pints. That could get very interesting.
Yeah, it's a 2 p.m. start for College Game Day local time. They're not used to that. They're used to going west and having to start at 6 a.m. local time.
Yeah.
But this is different. They're 2 p.m. local start, and there's gonna be a lot of kegs and eggs going on in the city of Dublin on Saturday. So
that's true. Yeah.
Oh, so but while I got you here, let me ask you about this because this has been simmering in the background all off season, and obviously we're gonna see a game on Saturday, so that's going to wipe it all away. But where is Florida State right now in terms of it's suing the ACC suing them back? Where does all of that stand, and are we any closer to a resolution on that?
The legal process runs its course slowly, as we well know. Where does it stand? I think Florida State feels like, and certainly the fan base does, like they're stuck in molasses because these things take a lot of time. They're in mediation now. I don't know that that's going to bear fruit or not. It doesn't necessarily portend of that. Who knows? I do. Andy, you hear whispers. I hear whispers. We both try to put our ear to the ground and talk to sources, especially people who are in that business, people who are lawyers for agents and coaches and that, and television networks and the like. And every now and then you'll hear something that you think you can put solace in. I try not to run with rumor. I try to, pretty much sit back and let this thing play out because it's very easy. You have a very eager group of fans that want to know at Florida State and Clemson what's going to happen, what the future looks like. They feel like, obviously, in order to compete long-term with the Big Ten or the SEC, they're going to have to be part of that Big Two, the Power Two, if you will. Really, it boils down to whether or not Fox or ESPN, in my opinion, decides that that's an asset they would go after. I've heard rumors that certainly Fox would love to plant a flag in the SEC's backyard or ESPN's backyard, if you consider the SEC to be that. It would maybe be a wise move for them to do that, to go grab a Florida State and a Clemson. I don't know who else is on the docket there, but certainly those are the two that want out, and they are making that known legally. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that. But right now I know this, regardless, whether the SEC wants them or doesn't, whether ESPN will decide to salvage some assets and restructure the ACC contract, and then, at that point decide that this is where Florida State and Clemson need to be, then maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't, maybe Fox comes swooping in. But I do know, just from the marketability of the program, and certainly when you talk to TV executives, and really objectively speaking, anybody who follows college football understands that Florida State is a top 10 or 15 asset in college football, period. It's really not arguable. The numbers bear that out too. It's not an opinion. When you look at ratings, you look at, all of that stuff. I think Florida State will find a home. The question is how soon. I don't believe they'll be out of the ACC in 2025, if that's what you're asking. I think the best chance they have, unless something happens in mediation, is probably to get this further down the road to where it becomes pretty clear that the ACC is going to need to figure out a settlement. And, what's the number? Because Florida State all along has been wanting to know the number. And we know why. We know why, right? We watched as use Texas and Oklahoma for an example. A lot of their expenditures to get out have been helped out by the network. And you can see where that would be something that would be very interesting for Florida State. They could never get that promise from, say, Fox publicly. That would have to be a wink, wink, nod, nod understanding behind closed doors. A lot of stuff we're not privy to, but I would believe that probably by 2026, Florida State's not in the ACC. 2027, the latest.
Okay. All right. Before we let you go, let's go back to the field. You mentioned Cam Davis, the freshman running back. Mm-hmm. Who's another Florida State player that the country doesn't know yet that after Saturday we might all be talking about?
So that's the thing, right? After Saturday, because when the depth chart came out, I really thought you might see Lil-Wayne McCoy, Elijah Moore, some of these guys that are true freshmen at wide receiver. Andy, I think the talent for Florida State at wide receiver is all in this freshman class and sophomore class. I think that this biggest question mark about Florida State this year are the starting wide receivers. I think that is a group that will really have to show and prove, because it's been an uneven camp for them. They've had moments in the last week, which is a good sign for Mike and this offense, that they finally started to gel and kind of come together and have some success. I can never tell, because we follow one singular camp on a daily basis. Are their struggles due to the fact that they're not exemplary, or is this because this defense, which I think is very, very good, is just kind of dominating the day? Defenses are always ahead of offenses early in the season. So I'm kind of curious, just like everybody else is, to see which of these receivers stand out. I do think by the mid-season report card, though, we'll be looking at the freshman receiver, perhaps a sophomore receiver in Hakeem Williams. We're going to be looking at those guys and saying, well, there's the future for Florida State. It's not in these seniors and juniors. It's in the freshmen and sophomores.
So between now and Saturday, what are you most excited to see in Ireland?
I've been fortunate. This is the third time I've been to Ireland. It's like a home away from home. I went here on my honeymoon 20 years ago. And I was here last year for a promotional trip that they did with Aer Lingus. They had us come in and kind of go do a lot of things that they were going to suggest that people who are making the trek over for this year's game should do, so we could relay back, obviously a promotional thing. The history here is fascinating, but I got to tell you, the one thing I haven't done, and I'm going to do it tomorrow for certain, is go to Trinity College and see the library. We're talking about a school that began in 1592. To try to put that into perspective, I love history, and I was thinking about this when I was preparing to go over there for tomorrow, and I was thinking, that school started not long after the Aztecs were wiped out. I mean, that's how far back in our history that school goes. So I'm really curious to go to that world famous library there and just kind of take that all in. That's my answer. I've been to plenty of pubs. I've been to plenty of museums. I've seen the castles and the Vikings and all the things that you need to see. I've been to a lot of the lovely counties, small farms, all of it. It's something to do, but that library is what I'm looking forward to seeing tomorrow.
That sounds amazing. I cannot wait. And we will be checking back on your adventures. And obviously we cannot wait for Saturday. Real football from Ireland.
Finally.
Thank you, Jeff.
Great to be with you, Andy.
That is Jeff Cameron. He's got big plans for this week in Ireland, as we all do. This is Andy Staples on 3, presented by Wendy's. That's right, new sponsor alert. Welcome our friends from Wendy's by downloading that Wendy's app. Getting yourself some Saucy Nuggs. It's so easy. Couple taps, you walk in, it's sitting right there for you. You're eating Saucy Nuggs. Change your life. Speaking of ads, and in this particular one, Dr. Pepper's not paying us, but they've done such a good job with the Fansville series that they dropped the trailer for this season of Fansville, which I'm sure we're going to see a million times during that Florida State Georgia Tech game. And I'm in. I'm sucked into the story again. And I realize, look, we shouldn't be giving people free ads here. We shouldn't. But I appreciate the effort put in by this ad agency that is clearly studied college football, clearly understands what we love about sport, and doesn't just go, I woke up feeling the cheesiest coach. Please never run that commercial again. Please. But Fansville, I'm in. Here's the new trailer.
On Season 7 of Fansville by Dr. Pepper, the new era of college football has arrived.
What's it mean, Sheriff?
The 12-team playoff. It's here.
And it's getting stranger than ever.
Someone's stealing our signs!
Dad, is it true that I was born a Tech fan?
No!
The landscape is shifting.
I hate my new conference.
The cast is growing.
I'm a new character.
And the game is changing.
They didn't put Dr. Pepper in this game? So unrealistic. We waited 11 years for nothing!
All aboard the hype train!
Fans are going off the rails.
Where you going? We're going all the way! Whoa!
Because this season we're going full steam ahead.
Hey guys, check out my new tattoo.
Into the great unknown. Or are we?
State quarterback injured in practice. He's out for the season.
Does this mean the hype is over?
Okay, everyone off the hype train.
I immediately regret this tattoo.
College football, it's a Pepper thing.
You got a sign-stealing reference. You got Quinn Ewers. We'll see if he can act like Bryce Young. Bryce Young is the peak of Fansville acting so far. He was downright creepy in that one. You've got complaints about conference realignment. You've got bracket-shaped crop circles. Christopher Jordan, I need Larry Culpepper back. No, you don't. Larry Culpepper was a stupid ad campaign, and Fansville is so much. This is like saying I want random 80s sitcom that got canceled after a season and a half over Breaking Bad. Fansville's the best commercial series we've seen in college football. The one I really want to delve into, you've got the kid, this is the son of face-painted State fan, saying, was I really born a Tech fan? This is the callback to an earlier season where you've got face-painted State fan and his wife, who we have not seen since, and the baby comes out a Tech fan, and the wife has this look on her face like, did face-painted State fan get cuckolded by a Tech fan? Where's his wife? Where's his kid's mom? I have so many questions. I'm hoping I get answers this season. All right, enough free advertising. You want ads? Pay for them. Come on. Or create a great series that will cause me to watch 2-hour YouTube deep dive videos. Not that I've done that for Fansville. Okay, maybe I've done that once. Let's deep dive back into Florida State, Georgia Tech. They are playing in Dublin on Saturday. We talked to Jeff Cameron from War Chant about the Seminoles. Let us go deep into the Yellow Jackets with my favorite former Yellow Jacket, Mr. Roddy Jones from ESPN. We are joined now by Roddy Jones of the ACC Network. We've talked about the Seminoles, but there's another ACC team in Dublin, the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Of course, Roddy, proud Georgia Tech alum. This is, what we got here? Look at that. I don't think it fits anymore.
It doesn't. My head got bigger or the helmet shrank, one or the other.
Have you been taking like broadcasting PEDs? Are you like Barry Bonds here, or?
It was a secret, but I've heard there's an investigation going on, Balco style, for broadcasting PEDs. Yeah, they've had to order bigger headsets as you know, my steroid use has gone up for the broadcast.
ESPN, he's kidding. I'm going to say it since ESPN, he's kidding. Please don't do anything to Roddy.
Thank you,
we need Roddy.
Protect me here.
We need Roddy calling games. So, all right, let's talk about this team because I'm excited about Georgia Tech this year. I thought Brent Key in his first full season as the head coach did a great job. I was very impressed with Haynes King and what Buster Faulkner and Chris Winkie did with him because he looked like a different human being than the person we saw at Texas A&M. That said, the ACC did Georgia Tech dirty with this schedule, so they could be better. It may not show up in the record. And oh, by the way, you get to start out against Florida State in Dublin.
It's it's kind of the life of a Georgia Tech fan. Like, it feels like every single year as we go through it, you look at the schedule, like the schedule's brutal because you typically schedule an SEC team, high-level SEC team with and then you got Georgia at the end. It had been Ole Miss in recent memory, but it's been Tennessee in the past. When I was there, we played Mississippi State when they were kind of on the rise.
Mm-hmm.
Then look at you just flashed up the schedule. At Louisville is tough. At Syracuse for their second ACC games, it'll be Syracuse first ACC game. That game is going to be packed in the JMA Wireless Dome. And it's such a unique environment that you never know how it's going to go. Then on the back end, obviously the Notre Dame thing comes around once in a blue moon. It comes this year in a year where you have Florida State to start, Georgia to end. You get Miami and NC State, two top 5 teams in the voting in the ACC, a North Carolina team that they've had good success against. They've won 3 straight against Carolina, but still a talented team. So the schedule's brutal. But I think all that being said, Andy, there's reason for optimism that this team might not have a better record, but can. You know, the Haynes King thing, I think, has been one of the quietest, really good quarterbacks from last year coming into this season, returning in the entire country. I mean, he had a stat line in the Power 5 that only Jaden Daniels, the Heisman Trophy winner, duplicated. 2,800 yards passing, 25 touchdowns passing, 700 yards rushing, and 10 touchdowns rushing. That is, there's some cherry picking of stats here. But when you have a stat line that matches the Heisman Trophy winner, that it's similar to the Heisman Trophy winners, you got a pretty good players. Got to protect the ball more. They've got some real weapons as well that I think have some room for natural growth.
Well, that's the law firm of Haynes and Haynes is pretty spectacular. You got the Jamal Haynes at running back, and then Eric Singleton felt like he was ready to break out last year. It feels like between freshman sophomore year, he could be even better.
It does. The biggest thing for Eric Singleton Jr. is the consistency. And I go back and I look at that Clemson game where he had a chance early in that game to really put some pressure on Clemson. Remember, that game came at a time where we were all doubting Clemson's offense. Can they create offense? Can they create big plays? Can they come from behind? And there was a post play early in that game that Eric Singleton, it was a little contested and a little off the mark, but very catchable. He ends up dropping it. There was another one in that game that he had a chance at and wasn't able to bring down. Like, those are the areas that I think he can take a step forward and start to make some real game-breaking plays. The type of plays that if you make that play at Clemson, now Clemson's having to play from behind, and all the circumstances that led to the high turnover game that Haynes King ended up having, maybe they don't happen. So I think there's some natural growth that'll happen there. You mentioned Justice Haynes, the running back, or excuse me, Jamal Haynes. I get, Justice Haynes, also from Georgia, but now at Alabama.
That's right.
Jamal Haynes.
And Justice's dad played for Georgia, just to confuse the matter more.
Just to keep mixing it up. Jamal Haynes was a receiver during at the start of camp last year, moved to running back, ended up having a 1,000-yard season. Another year of being a running back, of an offseason, of really focusing on the little things. I think he could have a big season as well.
So let's talk about this defense, because a lot of the same guys, and this was a defense that struggled against the run last year, but is an entirely new defensive staff. So what do you expect to look different?
Yeah, I think the thing that Tyler Santucci and those Duke defenses under Mike Elko were really good at was the very simple thing of getting the ball carrier from standing upright and running to down on the ground. They were very good at that. Something that Georgia Tech struggled with last year, tackling. And so I think they will improve from a fundamental tackling standpoint. Tyler Santucci has placed a big emphasis on this. I've been down there. They work on it a ton. They're doing some different things, some different drills to help focus on it. They're doing some different tackling techniques to try and be better at it and more sure-handed. So I think that will certainly improve. They feel really good about the edges. Kevin White back for another year after transferring over from Alabama. Didn't have the impact last year that many fans thought he could, but he is a guy that they have said has taken a step forward. They get Romello Height to transfer in. He has made an impact in fall camp in a way that I think they were really looking for from an edge rusher. They get Sylvain Yonjuan, who's a big body defensive end back as well. That'll help provide some depth. The biggest question for me is at linebacker. Kyle Eford's back at linebacker, very solid, not the most athletic, but sort of a neck roll plug guy. Trinilius Tatum is a big, long, former defensive back that has sort of been at linebacker for a few years, has not had that breakout season. I think he's sort of the X factor. He's big, he's long, he's super athletic, and if he can have a good year, then I think this defense will have a good year.
So how do you think this game plays out? Because I'm guessing that Florida State is going to try to run it down Georgia Tech's throat. Because that was what you could do against Georgia Tech last year. And also Florida State has a very experienced offensive line and a new quarterback.
I completely agree. I think this is a game where both teams are going to want to run the football. Georgia Tech in the bowl game against UCF ran the ball 27 times in a row. And I'm not saying that's who they want to be consistently, but they are a more run-heavy offense, and they're going to create some run actions that they can have play action off of and create some open players either down the field or in the flats. Get Haynes King on the move, use his legs. And then Florida State, I completely agree. I think DJU's legs will be used sparingly, but they're gonna test Georgia Tech. Like, this is one of the worst rush defenses in the country last year. So let's see if you got better. We've got a great offensive line. We got some big running backs and some explosive running backs in Lawrence Toafili. So let's see. And then I think they're going to institute more of what Oregon State had than they have in the past, where they're going to run the ball, hard play action, shots intermediate to deep, and try and limit some of the shorter passes that DJ has struggled with in the past.
So for Haynes, he had 16 interceptions last year. That was the one blemish on that really nice stat line that you mentioned earlier. How does he reduce that number? Because it feels like if you have a couple of those against this team, you got a problem.
100%. That's the one thing Georgia Tech can't do. Like, you can't turn the ball over. You can't create short fields for this offense as they try and find themselves. I think he just needs to I think additional year in the offense will certainly help. He needs to not force the ball. And I think some of those interceptions were trying to force it. Particularly, you look at the Clemson game where they came in bunches. It's trying to force the ball into a space where he shouldn't. The ability for the offense to sort of everyone in the offense to be where they're supposed to be, I think will help. So your check down is where you expect it to be. Every route is where you expect it to be. And all the conversions are where you expect them to be. I also think Georgia Tech is not a team that goes super fast. They will use tempo, but they're not the fastest team in the country. So I actually think helmet communications could help a guy like Haynes King, where Buster Faulkner can give him reminders and tips and tricks right before the play. And with the year, this was his first year staying healthy the entire season too. I think there's some growth there too.
Well, and you mentioned the helmet communication. I think it's interesting because this is the first time we're going to see that. And you've got Mike Norvell, who's a play calling head coach, who we've all said we think this will benefit his offenses quite a bit because he can be in that QB's ear. But I've heard multiple people talk about it, even the Auburn people, like Hugh Freeze and his staff have talked about maybe going slower and maybe even huddling more. Ohio State's talked about huddling. They practice huddling. Do you see this actually slowing offenses down a little bit? Because then you're not using signalers to get to the receivers and get that information out there. You can just tell the quarterback, and then he tells everybody else.
I certainly think there's the potential for it. I've also heard on the other side, coaches saying they're going to go faster so that you can get up to the line of scrimmage. You can have a defense on his heels. You can give a quarterback one nugget and then go. So I don't know, man. Like that is one of the biggest wild cards that we're going to have. I certainly think someone like Mike Norvell is going to benefit a ton from it. I mean, there's times where you're watching Florida State on film last year when you've got the all 22, you can see the opposite sideline, and Mike Norvell walks down the sideline behind the defense and gives Jordan Travis like a thumbs up, like, yep, plays good, let's roll.
Yeah,
that is going to be invaluable, as he's going to be able to get in that quarterback's ear and say, hey, we're good, or hey, check here, rather than having to signal it in or give hand signals or winks and nods. So I honestly don't know. I am fascinated to see what it does for tempo. Do coaches start to do things differently? And I would imagine at places like Ohio State, with Chip Kelly coming in with the overwhelming talent advantage that they have, like, I think slowing down, could it help them? Sure. If they go fast, could that help them? Maybe. If you operate under the principle that more plays gives your guys more opportunities to beat their guys, then sure. So I really don't know, man.
That's probably the best thing about this season is there's so much we don't know. Like the ACC, I've been thinking about, we assume Florida State's going to be good again. We assume Clemson will be pretty good. Miami's a team that the roster has undergone such a change since Mario got there, but we still want to see all of that come to fruition. NC State should be good. Like, you're very high on Virginia Tech. I know you're pretty high on North Carolina as well. But when you look at this race, how do you think it's going to shake out? Like Florida State, this is the weirdest thing. Florida State will be a quarter of the way through its ACC schedule on the Monday of week 1.
That's crazy, huh? I think the ACC race is going to be fascinating. I picked Clemson and Miami in the championship game. Some of that is because I think their ceilings are higher than Florida State's this year. I just struggle to see Florida State better or as good in enough positions to duplicate what they did a year ago. After those three, I like Virginia Tech. I'm a little wary of how they finished the season and who they beat up on to sort of get this momentum. Like, they kind of beat teams that were at the bottom of the league last year to get to a bowl game. And then obviously in the bowl game, they beat a Tulane team that, everybody had one foot out of the door during that one. And it was in the rain in the Military Bowl. NC State's going to be intriguing, man. The defense scares me a little bit. How do you replace Peyton Wilson? And he's not the only one they're replacing. Basically, that entire linebacking core is gone. They've got a couple pieces in the secondary that they need to replace. But the schedule is manageable. They get Clemson early. They've really owned North Carolina at the end of the year. I don't know what to make of Syracuse yet. There's so much new there. I don't know what to make of Duke yet. There's so much new, particularly on offense there. So it's an incredibly manageable schedule. So if you looked up at NC State was in the championship game, it would kind of give me Louisville from a year ago vibes, like really good team, but probably not as good as their record because the schedule set up really well for them.
Yeah, and the Louisville gets a tougher schedule this year, but probably has a better roster. Though I guess we'll find Colin Lacey now out for a little while, but that's the intriguing part. So you got Louisville we'll find out because they've got Georgia Tech, they've got Notre Dame, SMU, Miami. Like, we're going to see them be challenged.
Yeah.
Let's talk Miami, though. Miami's got that season opener at Florida. The roster is where I think if you asked Mario Cristobal when he took the job and you said, here's what your roster will look like in 3 years, he'd go, okay, That's what I wanted. How do you translate that into competing for championships?
First of all, they got to get out of their own way. And you can't have the massive mess ups. And the Georgia Tech one stands out, and we keep referencing that one. But there's numerous instances last year of them going into halftime with 3 timeouts, being super conservative in the first half, not going for points. So I think they need to get out of their own way from that standpoint. And then you cannot get away from what should make this team special. And I think that's running the football. Cam Ward's great, but to me, he's the cherry on top. And honestly, the Cam Ward hype, I think, has gotten a little ahead of where his play was at Washington State. Like, I mean, he was the offensive player, or excuse me, the overall player of the year in the ACC in the preseason. It's like, come on, dude, Amarian Hampton's coming back, and he was, the finalist for the award. And Cam Ward was good at Washington State, but there was a little too much hero ball. There were a lot of fumbles, and so he's going to have to correct some of those mistakes. But this is a team that's going to win games because they can run the football and stop the run. Offensive line, defensive line, that's what's going to separate them. So Shannon Dawson can't get too cute with all the weapons he has at receiver, which he has some really good ones. And then you can't have the massive, massive toe stub because of something stupid.
Yeah, we keep bringing up the Georgia Tech game from last year because it was so amazing. Like, we're all screaming at our TVs, take a knee. Take a knee. What are you doing? Take a knee. But the part of that one that I think gets lost is the defensive collapse after Georgia Tech got the ball.
Georgia Tech had I don't remember if it was a negative play or just an incomplete pass on first down. Like, their first play was a disaster. And then they get a big chunk on second down, and then the next play they're in the end zone. Like, the defensive collapse was just as calamitous as the offensive collapse. Like, it was just as extreme. And there are some tricky spots in this Miami schedule this year. Like, that trip to Cal doesn't feel warm and fuzzy. The trip to USF doesn't feel warm and fuzzy with where those two lie.
USF has some opportunity here. They're at Alabama, and Miami comes to them.
Like, remember what happened to Alabama there last year? I mean,
yes.
It doesn't feel great, Andy. And I'm not predicting them to lose, and I don't think they will lose. But especially the trip to Cal. Like, Cal's a good team, man. And if you come out there, it's a little bit of a sleepy environment, long trip. That's one you can't trip up.
So you got the new teams in the ACC: Stanford, Cal, SMU. Is Jade Knott from Cal the most exciting player from that group? Like, they got to play at Auburn, and then they hit their ACC schedule. Like, I'm excited to see Jade Knott against all these teams.
I am too. He is the most exciting player. I don't think it's by a big margin though. Like, Elick Ayomanor from Stanford is phenomenal at receiver, and Preston Stone, the quarterback at SMU, is a really exciting player. It got him in trouble last year in the Navy game as his excitement and running around, ended up having him have a season-ending injury. But the way he creates time, the way he moves around to throw is really impressive. So I'm really excited about. I think Stanford, is probably a long-term project. They will have some good players, and I do think they will beat some people in the ACC. I'm very excited to see Cal. I think they've got some players. I think they've got some potential. They have some interesting teams coming to Berkeley, Miami, NC State, Syracuse later on. Like, those are teams that could be in that hunt down the stretch. Syracuse probably less so than the other two, but it is super interesting. And then SMU, the talk around SMU is very exciting. But I don't know where I am on it, Andy. And maybe you tell me where you are, because SMU was certainly the best team in the American last year. But I have a tough time not feeling like it was a watered down American without UCF, without Cincinnati, without Houston. And Houston had been down for a couple of years, but without UCF and Cincinnati in particular, like, there wasn't that caliber team. Tulane was banged up for a lot of the season. UTSA was a good team, but they didn't play UTSA. So I kind of feel like they beat up on a lesser league last year. The 0-6 in the last 6 power conference games is not a determining factor for me, but it is a factor that goes into the punch. I just have to see it with SMU because, that Boston College game at the end of the year kind of sticks in my head. Like, those two teams looked evenly matched. Boston College, dead average ACC team. SMU is definitely more exciting than Boston College, particularly offensively, but I got to see it with them early on.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think they need to show us that they've developed a field stretching receiver, because they've got some reliable ones, but not anybody who just stood out last year. They obviously have two quarterbacks who can play in Preston Stone and Kevin Jennings. I talked to Rhett Lashley at ACC spring meetings, and he said, like he talked to Gus Malzahn, who went from the American to the Big 12 the year before. And Gus's big lesson was load up and get as deep as you can on the line of scrimmage through the transfer portal, because that will come back to bite you in the butt if you don't. And you saw Rhett try to do that. If you look at who they brought in, they were bringing in players from big programs who maybe just hadn't played, but they're big bodies. We don't know if they're going to be good. And we don't even know if a lot of them are going to start, because it could be that they were brought in for depth. But does that matter? And like you said, that the Boston College game is a really interesting point. Like, that's them against an average ACC team. You've got to be able to play that every week. And what Gus was trying to get across to Rhett, I think, in that piece of advice is, it is the week-to-week grind that changes. Like, Cal and Stanford probably won't notice that, because I don't think the week-to-week grind from the Pac-12 to the ACC is that big of a difference. But it is a big difference from the American to the ACC.
Yeah, you're not going to get a Navy, in the ACC. You're not going to get, some of the teams at the bottom where it's just it is not only a surefire win, but like the game's over after the first quarter because your offense is too explosive. You're clearly more athletic than the other team at every spot. Your defensive line can do whatever it wants. Like there's no game on the schedule, and SMU's got a fairly favorable schedule, but there's no game on the schedule where they're going to walk in and just out talent the other team, including Virginia, because Virginia has talent. Like, they got some really good players. So that to me is sort of the question mark. And then the environments, even the home games, especially the one against Florida State early in the season. I want to see SMU fans show up. They have not necessarily had a reason to in the past, being in the American, and even when they've been good, the excitement of the American has not roused that fan base. And I've been there a number of times. I'm afraid that Florida State game, if they don't, will be a Florida State home game, because Florida State fans will travel to Dallas.
Oh, they're going to be pumped because you get to go hang out in Highland Park all weekend.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're right about that. They need to establish a home field advantage. We're going to see the Mustangs, though, this week. They do play week 0. They're in Reno against Nevada. Jeff Choate's debut as the Wolfpack's head coach. So this is going to be fun, Roddy. I can't wait. We got real football this weekend. We're here.
We are. It's been a long wait, Andy, but I'm excited, man. And I don't have a game this week, so I'm pure fan mode. I'm picking Florida State, but that's only an emotional hedge because I'm all over the Jackets. I'm all over the Jackets.
All right. Well, cannot wait. Roddy Jones going with his heart there. I'm not sure what body part this particular bettor went with. Heart, gut, loins. Not sure. But John Ewing from BetMGM let us know last night that some bettor at BetMGM wagered $10,000 on Colorado at plus 2,500 to win the Big 12. So if the Buffaloes win the Big 12, that person wins $250,000. Otherwise, they're out $10,000. This is that time of year. You go with your heart, your mind, your gut, your loins. It's almost time, everybody. Colorado opens its season next Thursday against North Dakota State. This Thursday is a Dear Andy show. We want your questions. I will answer them on the show and in the written version of Dear Andy. So get those questions to me, Andy_Staples on X, Andy_Staples on Instagram, or you can email them to me, AndyStaplesOn3@gmail.com. Get those questions in. Let's go. We'll talk to you tomorrow. I will answer your questions. The answers may or may not be correct.